Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are embarking on a really fascinating journey right into the center of our own heads. We're going to deconstruct exactly how our brains naturally and quite stubbornly fight against clear thought. But more importantly, we're giving you a masterclass toolkit. You'll learn how to think critically, generate truly innovative ideas, and ultimately communicate them so persuasively that people actually listen. So if you've ever felt totally frustrated by a stubborn mind, whether it's your own or someone else's, you are in the right place.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with Section 1, the flawed human brain, then move into building a critical mindset, the power of questioning, innovating, and thinking productively, and we'll wrap it all up with the art of persuasion. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The flawed human brain. Let's navigate some of these cognitive traps.
To really understand our cognitive blind spots, we have to look at a brilliant model from Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. He revealed that we basically have two cognitive systems constantly battling it out. System 1 is kind of the hero of our daily lives. It's fast, automatic, emotional, and heavily relies on familiar patterns. System 2, on the other hand, is slow, deliberate, and methodical. It requires a ton of intense focus. And because System 2 is just so physically draining to use, our brains naturally default to System 1 whenever possible. And well, that is exactly where the trouble begins.
You see, that default to System 1 relies on what psychologists call heuristics. These are basically mental shortcuts that let us make split-second decisions. Now, while the shortcuts absolutely kept our ancestors alive out in the wild, today, they kind of trap us. They create massive blind spots like my side bias and cause us to just completely ignore crucial warning signs. Just think about the catastrophic collapse of Enron back in 2001. The financial red flags were literally everywhere, but assumption and confirmation biases caused really smart people to completely miss the whole shebang.
Which leads us to a fascinating question that researchers have obsessed over for decades. When we're faced with deep ideological divides, why does presenting pure, undeniable data rarely ever change someone's mind?
Well, the core of it is captured beautifully in a quote by Elizabeth Kolbert. Human reasoning didn't evolve to help us solve abstract logic puzzles, right? It evolved to help us survive in social groups. Studies literally show that our brains release a dopamine rush, a genuine hit of pleasure, when we process information that supports our existing biases. We don't get that same rush from uncovering the objective truth. We are biologically hardwired to dig our heels in and stand our ground.
So let's move on to Section 2, building a critical mindset. It's time to overcome these mental illusions. Tech philosopher Tom Chatfield suggests a really powerful tool to interrupt that fast, emotional System 1. It's called constructive doubt. This just means recognizing when you simply don't have enough information and actively hitting the pause button to rethink your gut reaction. Instead of building weak straw man out of opposing arguments just so you can easily knock them down, constructive doubt forces you to build steel men. That means you find the absolute strongest possible version of an opposing view, and you rigorously test your own ideas against it.
And a fantastic everyday trick to practice that doubt is the explain like I'm 5 method. Trying to explain a wildly complex topic to a 5-year-old forces you to strip away all the fancy jargon and self-justification. It is wild how quickly this reveals the actual gaps in your own knowledge. Honestly, if you can't explain it simply, you probably don't understand it anywhere near as well as you think you do. Once you've taken a breath and exposed those assumptions, you need a framework. Mastering 3 specific forms of logical reasoning, deductive, inductive, and abductive, is going to help you bypass those emotional blind spots. Deductive reasoning moves from known facts to a guaranteed conclusion. Inductive reasoning builds broad generalizations from specific observations, and abductive reasoning helps you draw the absolute best logical conclusion when your data is still a bit sparse. These are your foundational tools for methodically evaluating the world.
All right, on to Section 3, the power of questioning, or the interpersonal art of inquiry.
Now, dating all the way back to ancient Greece, the Socratic method is still an incredibly powerful tool for probing assumptions. It demands a few things: intense, active listening without interrupting, clearly defining your terms before you even start arguing, questioning where the facts actually came from, and relentlessly testing the logic of the conclusions. But here's the catch. This only works if you practice intellectual humility. You're not asking questions to prove you're the smartest person in the room. You're doing it to uncover reality.
To actually pull this off, we have to understand the people we're talking to. Expert interrogator James Pyle breaks respondents down into 4 basic archetypes. If you're dealing with a dictator who blurts out opinions as absolute facts, or a commentator who just rambles on forever, you've got to adapt your questioning style. Recognizing who you're talking to is the secret sauce for building rapport and getting accurate information without making them completely shut down defensively.
And what if you suspect you're dealing with an evader? Someone who's bending the truth to keep the peace or hide something. Try the forward and backward pass technique. Ask them to recall chronological events completely out of sequence. True memories are usually anchored to the events themselves, not a rigid timeline. By casually asking them to jump backward or forward in their story, you naturally expose the inconsistencies, and you do it without ever sounding like a hostile interrogator.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Innovate and Think Productively, Generating Fresh Solutions.
Okay, to truly innovate, we first have to defeat what's known as the gator brain. This is that primitive reptilian core of our brain that cares about one thing: reflexive survival, fight, flight, or freeze. When we're stressed, overwhelmed, or staring down a brutal Friday afternoon deadline, the gator brain completely takes over. It shuts down all creativity, making us cling to the safety of familiar, repetitive routines. You simply cannot innovate when your brain thinks it's fighting for its life.
Defeating that stress lets us unlock a totally different level of thought. There is a massive difference between reproductive thinking, or Kaizen, which is basically just tweaking and refining an existing idea to make it a bit more efficient, and productive thinking, or Tenkaizen. Productive thinking is about generating brand new, revolutionary insights. Kaizen might help you build the world's most perfect buggy whip, but it takes Tenkaizen to invent the automobile. So how do we get to that highly productive state? You absolutely must delay your inner critic. Brainstorming usually fails because we just stop too early. You have to push way past the safe, boring ideas. You got to wade through the slightly weird ideas and actively force yourself into the wild, crazy, and even seemingly impossible concepts. It's only by taking those totally ridiculous concepts and linking them back together that you're going to strike gold and find those expansive, game-changing solutions.
And finally, Section 5, The Art of Persuasion. Communicating with clarity and empathy.
You've got this brilliant idea now, right? Well, the biggest threat to it is the curse of knowledge. Cognitive scientist Steven Pinker points out that this is a huge cognitive blind spot. It happens when you know your subject so incredibly well that you completely forget what it feels like to not know it. It's a sort of professional narcissism, and it results in this dense, jargon-stuffed acadese that totally alienates your audience and kills your persuasive power on the spot. To fix this, Pinker suggests adopting the classic style of communication. Imagine you're a cinematographer, literally directing the audience's gaze toward a shared truth. You have to ruthlessly cut out what he calls zombie words. You know the ones, those lifeless abstract nouns like implementation or framework that just sort of lumber across the page. Instead, use sharp, active language that actually respects your audience's intelligence and invites them into a beautifully visualized world. But listen. Even the clearest writing won't save a flawed strategy. Going back to something we talked about earlier in the explainer, there is a hard truth in social science. Facts alone do not persuade us, especially when those facts feel like an attack. If you bombard someone with raw data and essentially tell them, hey, you're wrong, you're just going to instantly trigger their gator brain and double their my-side bias. So, what's the secret? Empathy has to come before evidence, always. To actually persuade someone, you have to establish common ground first. Put them in an optimistic mood, validate their fears, reassure them that, hey, we are all just trying to figure out these complex issues together. It's only after you've built that human connection that their minds will actually be open enough to hear your logic and your data. We have covered so much ground today, from hacking the flawed judgments of System 1 to wielding the Socratic method and finally learning to communicate with clarity and real empathy. So, as you walk away from this explainer with your upgraded cognitive toolkit, I want to leave you with one final, exciting challenge to keep this momentum going. Take a look inside your own mind right now. What deeply held assumption are you going to bravely question today?